How do you balance a thriving career with your faith and family priorities? Our guest today is Brooke Boltz, and she is a distinguished attorney, and her focus is injury and insurance. And she is licensed in Florida and Texas. She has a 15-year successful career, and she has built a successful multi seven-figure business. She is a mom, she is a wife, she is an active supporter of faith-based female entrepreneurs, and she hosts the Ms. Biz podcast, which is a top 1.5% podcast globally. And she's also committed to helping Christians outside the church to get connected and unify. And so she's involved in a number of nonprofits in that regard. And so she's got a lot going on. And it's going to be great to hear from her perspective how she balances all that and makes it all work. So, Brooke, welcome to the Leaders Transformation. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I am honored to be here.
Well, it is an honor to have you. And I do want to do a shout out to Rosie Gould, who is from Guest Glow Media. I always like to do a shout out for those that are supporting this show. And she did this introduction for us to have this conversation. So thank you, Rosie. We appreciate you. So, Brooke, let's talk about how do you manage all of those things? I kind of did a little overview on all the different hats that you wear, and I'm sure there's probably others. But how do you manage all that and organize your time so that you can contribute to all of those effectively?
Sometimes I have no idea because it's really just taking it day by day and prioritizing your time, having a calendar where things are set out, and really delegating anything that doesn't have to be done by me to others on the team. And that's kind of taken years to get to the place where I have enough staff and team members that I can rely on who do an excellent job and do things the same way that I would do them. But now that I'm in that place, I can take on more because I can delegate out things that don't have to be done by me to my excellent team. And then I can focus my time on the things that really need my attention.
Yeah, so there's certain things that only you can do, right? And then there's things that you can delegate. How do you determine? And I know there's a lot of people out there that will say, yeah, but if I want it done right, I got to do it myself, all of that. So, like, how do you decide this I need to do and this I can delegate and I can get it done maybe not as well as me, maybe even better, but I can release myself from that task.
For me, as a lawyer, the law requires that I have to do, or a lawyer has to do, depositions, court appearances, and mediations. So I do have another lawyer who works with me. And so she has been able to take on a lot of those responsibilities for me. But if she's not available or she's already booked, then those are things that I would have to do. In addition to that, I do a lot of the marketing and in-person networking myself. I can delegate that, but I find that so far, no one I've delegated that to has had the same level of success with bringing in new business. And I think it's because as a business owner, you're just in a unique position to build those relationships. And so for me, that is something that I do personally. It probably could be delegated, but we probably wouldn't have as much success if I delegated it out exclusively. And then aside from that, I'm answering staff questions. I am, giving direction. If an email comes in that needs to be handled, I'll forward it and say, hey, can you handle this thing? Prepare a proposed response, send it to me for approval. Or if I get off the phone with another attorney and things need to be done, then I'm sending an email or a message, hey, to so-and-so, can you do these things? So it's kind of managing the ship and sending directions to different people to do different tasks. And then aside from that, doing things that have to be done by a lawyer or things that involve marketing and building the firm.
So one of the reasons why we talked and why I thought it would be really great to have you on the show, because this show is about transformation, and I know that you are doing things differently at your firm in terms of the culture, legal, the legal industry has a tendency to be like all in, known for working extremely long hours and no balance in terms of work-life balance. And I know that you have done it a little bit differently as you grow and continue to grow. How have you kind of determined when it's the right time to add that extra person on? You know what I mean? Like, so to be able to do all the things, obviously you need a team. And then there's this, when do I hire that next person to come on? So I'm not having somebody sitting around doing nothing, but I'm also not stretching my team too far,
Yes. So the telltale sign for me that it's time to hire someone new is when someone on my team who ordinarily is sharp on the ball and doesn't make mistakes, if that person all of a sudden starts to miss things or make a mistake or drop the ball somewhere that's not customary for them, then that is a sign to me that they have too much on their plate. And that's when I start looking for someone to help them.
I love that because I can't tell you how many times I've had clients that I've worked with who have said to me at that point, right? Somebody's starting to drop the ball, not maybe they're making mistakes where they normally wouldn't. And they're saying, and I literally had a client once years ago who said, I just don't see how they're committed. They're not committed to the work and they're not committed to this firm. I'm like, oh my gosh, she is putting in hours in the evenings, on weekends, and so forth. She is committed. But to your point, then it's like maybe it's not about her commitment level, it's about capacity and how much she can actually manage. So I love that. And let's dive a little bit further into like, what do you do differently within your firm in terms of the culture that you've established? Because I know you came, and maybe you can tell that story, how you came from that really heavy workload environment to now saying, hey, I don't want to create that in my own firm.
Sure. This was actually a struggle for me to have a mindset shift because the firm that I came from, some of the mantras that I would hear from the higher level partners were things like the reward for good work is more work. And the managing partner at one of the offices always said, must be nice. So if you're like, hey, I got to take my kid to the doctor, must be nice, or hey, I'm got to leave for work to leave work at 6 p.m. today. Must be nice. That was his saying that he said all the time, must be nice. If you were doing anything other than working. So it was just a lot of hours and a lot of expectation. And that's kind of what I grew up in. And I became accustomed to it. And even though I was working a lot of hours, I don't think I realized the toll that it was taking on me because I did it for 9 years and it was just a way of life. And when I left that firm and went out on my own, I actually remember the day I was my last day at that firm and I was driving home. And for the first time, my emails had been shut down. So I had no emails to look at. My calendar was obviously clear. It was my last day. I had no phone calls coming in, and I could physically feel my blood pressure dropping in my body as I was driving home. And I had this awareness that this is the first time that I'm not stressed to the max in years. And I didn't even recognize it during all those years because it was just my day to day. It was how I always was. And I remember when I met my husband, he tried signing me up for yoga classes because I was always so stressed out and I would be really short tempered and it would come out to the people I love because of the stress I was under. And so, and not to say that I don't have any stress anymore, because I certainly do. A business ownership has a whole different type of stress that comes with it. But when I created my firm, I struggled initially because when the clock struck 5 o'clock and everyone's going home, my mind is saying those same things like your client. Well, this isn't a bank. We don't work bank hours. That's what my old partner used to say too. Um, we're not a bank. We don't work bank hours. And that was what my mind was repeating to me, all of these things I've heard. And suddenly I asked myself, okay, is the work being done? Are we meeting deadlines? Are we profitable? And the answer was yes to all those questions. And so I said, okay, and are the employees happy and satisfied with their job? Yes. So I had to change my mentality to be, if things are getting done, if the deadlines are met, if the clients are happy, the employees are happy, and we're having a profitable bottom dollar, then they don't need to work any more hours than 40 hours a week. And we can all still, we can have a happier existence as a whole because the employees are working a reasonable workload. So that was a mentality shift for me. And then in addition to that, just in terms of the culture, I do a lot in terms of trying to recognize and incentivize and reward people for doing their best work and going above and beyond. And so we just had really good success with employee retention. I have some employees who've been with me from the very beginning who are still here. We rarely lose an employee. We try to be low drama and everyone does their job in a good way. And we're not a huge business. We've got between 15 and 20 employees, but I'm also very selective of who we have on the team. They've got to be someone who works well with others and isn't someone who creates a lot of drama.
Yeah. This reminds me of a conversation I had a few years back with somebody on this show, James Lenhoff, and he had a financial wealth building company and very successful, I don't know, 30, 40 employees. And normally that's another industry, right? It's like long hours and so forth. And he actually said to his employees who thought the new ones that would come and they thought, if I work those extra hours in the evening that I'm going to get like brownie points, right? And they're going to notice that. They're going to be impressed by that. And he said, look, it's 5 o'clock. I'm leaving and I want you to leave. And because I'm not going to be here at 7 to see that you've been here. And I don't want you to be here at 7. In fact, on Fridays, they would close earlier, not just in the summertime, all the time, right? They just closed early so everybody could go home and enjoy their time with their families. And the concern was that they wouldn't get as much done. They wouldn't be as profitable. And in fact, they found out as they were doing this is that they were actually more profitable because their people were rested. They were getting more accomplished in less time. They were happier and, and more successful. And actually some of the employees were saying, hey, there's this firm over here and that firm over there that's starting to do that as well. And they were like, that's our unique thing, right? And he said, no, we want them to. We want to be right. That example for others to say it's possible. You can have a life and build a successful business and a career at the same time. And recently just had Danielle Hayden on, who is an accountant. And, she was talking as well about this idea of like taking care of your people and making sure that people get that time that they need. And she said something really, really good, which was not all profit is equal. And so when she sees that someone is really profitable, she asks the question, well, that's fantastic. Is there a cost? What's the cost to that? Right? Is it because you're so successful and so profitable because you're working such long hours and you have no life and and you're unhappy and your family hasn't seen you in weeks? Then it's not a win as it would be if you're building it like you're talking about. So I love that. And I hear that theme more and more and more. We're talking about having workplaces which are more humane workplaces where people can actually enjoy what they do. And it starts like with these simple concepts, but that so often are not put into place. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah. I read a statistic that said every time you lose an employee, it costs you 1/3 of that employee's annual salary to replace them. So employee turnover can be a huge financial problem for businesses if it's happening too often. And so, and not to mention the stress it puts on others who have to pick up the weight for the missing person, plus the work that's not getting done, and the customers and clients who can become unhappy because there's no one filling that role for a while. So I just really put a lot of emphasis and focus on employee retention, and it's one of the most rewarding things you can do in a business because you see the direct reward of how these people appreciate the things that you do for them. It's just something that I think some employers don't recognize the value that it has on them, but also yourself, because you're blessed and you feel good because you're helping others.
Yeah, absolutely. What has been the most challenging aspect of running a law firm like yours?
The Florida legislature. They changed the laws. I mean, we were running and moving and doing big things and going up and up and up every year. And all of a sudden, the Florida legislature decided that attorneys were the reason that the insurance premiums are going up so high, and we're the reason that insurers are leaving the state of Florida and insurance companies are going out of business. So they just changed the laws a bunch of ways and just turned my law firm and others like me upside down, because the same work we used to do that was fairly profitable is now much less profitable. So in a lot of ways, it's kind of been back to the drawing board on how do we keep moving and keep growing. And sometimes I heard someone say one time, sometimes you hustle just to stand still. And that's kind of what I've been doing this last year, is uh, redirecting the focus of the firm and just trying to maintain, really, more than anything. And hopefully we'll get back to the growing place again here in the next year or two. But for now, I'm just trying to maintain with all the changes that have kind of come at me quickly.
Yeah. Well, I hear in that resilience, right? Being able to handle the challenges. There's different things that are going to come up, things like that, which you can't control, things that sometimes maybe personal things that happen in our lives, whatever. But it's the pandemic, things happen. And it's like, what do you do in the midst of that to continue to move forward? It kind of sounds like that's where you're at right now. So,
It
yeah.
really gave me an appreciation for the people who suffered during the pandemic. The pandemic for me really didn't affect me because we could all work from home and keep moving. The business kept going because we're not dependent on people coming in person to the office to make money. And so I don't think I really understood or appreciated how much those businesses struggled during the pandemic who were shut down. And then when the laws changed, I had a whole new appreciation, and I actually um, apologized to people for not understanding and not appreciating how devastating of a time that was for them. And it really brought into perspective how you think as a business owner, you've got control of everything, right? It's up to me. If I go hustle and I go do these certain things, then I'm going to be successful. And sometimes that's true, but other times things can happen out of your control that all of a sudden just can be devastating. And so that's kind of what's happened to me recently with the law changes, but it happens in different ways to other businesses. And it's why we have to always be working and hustling, and also be diversifying our businesses when we can, so that we can pivot and adjust when those things happen.
Yeah. So let's shift gears and talk about your family and faith, those priorities. And I know that you have a passion for, I alluded to in the beginning, you have a passion for helping female entrepreneurs and also unifying Christians outside the church. And so, talk about how you integrate all of this, and maybe even how you're also in that, how you actually integrate your faith into your business itself.
Sure. When I worked at the big law firm, you kind of feel like you're on somebody else's turf. And so you really need to be respectful of that separation of your faith from your work life. And I always was very careful to keep my faith pretty private when I was in that position. And then, but I also kind of felt like I wasn't really being a good witness because I just wasn't really sharing. I was kind of just being very private, and I kind of had a burden that I carried around with me that I wasn't truly being myself. And so when I started my own business, I committed that I was going to be comfortable being myself because it was my business. And so I did some things to kind of try to hold me accountable in that regard. But I put a Bible verse on my conference room wall. I put a Bible verse on my website, and I am much more open about my faith just in conversation and things like that. And I think people have gotten to know me as a Christian as well as an entrepreneur and business leader. And I feel a lot more peace about who I am because I'm being true to who I am and not feeling like I have to hide it. And it's not that that firm ever told me I needed to hide it. It was just something that I felt it was self-imposed, really, probably more than anything, because I was on someone else's turf and their business. That's just kind of how I felt. But turning to what my passion is for helping women entrepreneurs, that was something that I learned over the course of time as I was growing my own business. And I'm kind of a self-taught entrepreneur. There's no one in my family who ever has been a business owner. The closest thing is my grandpa had a drywall hanging business, but I didn't really learn much from his experience. And so I was kind of figuring things out on my own. My dad was a pastor and my mom was a legal assistant. And so when I started my own business, I just was finding information from all which ways, trying to find mentors and people who I could learn from. And so as I started to learn new things from different places, I just found myself being drawn to conversations with other women who were going through the same. And I learned from women who were more successful than me. And when I met someone who was in earlier stages and we started talking, I just got so excited about sharing with them all the things that had worked for me or the things that had not worked for me. And we had an instant connection because we had this common ground of building businesses. And so I just really developed a passion for sharing the things that I had learned over the course of time with other people, particularly those who might not have a formal education in business, and just kind of sharing the do's and don'ts from my perspective and the things that have worked for me. And then finally, you asked me about the unifying of the church, and that is something that was ingrained in me from my father, who was a pastor. He was a Methodist pastor for a number of years, and I remember sitting in church as a teenager and hearing from my friend that she was visiting a church down the road and feeling just kind of a sense of betrayal by my friend because she was going to that church instead of my dad's church, and having an awareness that I didn't want to feel that way, but I still did nonetheless. And that feeling has remained in the back of my mind even as an adult, that I don't want Christians to feel in competition with each other over which church they choose to go to. And yet, as I look at it today, I think, at least in the area where I have lived in my 43 years, the churches are all pretty individualized. And you rarely, if ever, see the churches coming together to do anything together. And to me, that grieves me because Christianity is the widest spread religion in our country. But I think we're also, in some ways, the weakest because we are so divided. And if we had a way to come together and stand on the principles of the Bible, I think we could have much more influence and effect in our country than we currently are because we are not working together. So I created a Facebook group called Jesus Tribe, and I have 3 of them currently for 3 counties near me: Jesus Tribe, Orange County, Seminole County, and Volusia County. And it's just a place for Christians who live in that county to communicate and to know we exist. And so I think that just by having that communication with other Christians is a step in the right direction. Because aside from that, if you want to relate to the Christian community in your area, you're really limited to just whatever your church body offers. And I would like to be supporting other church bodies and supporting other Christians who are in ministry and helping to spread the word for the other things that they're hosting and promoting. And I'd like to know the prayer requests of other people in my community so that I can pray for them. And I can't know those things if I'm not connected to those people. So that's what Jesus Tribe is about. And it's a major passion of mine, and just connecting Christians so that we can relate together.
Well, I love that. And it is so true, because you look at other religions or other affinity groups and they all congregate and collaborate together. And we do, like, in these silos, of these different churches. And it's like, why did you choose that church and not our church? It's like it's like we're all on the same team. We're all,
Yes.
and so that's so good. And sometimes it's the simple things. It's not like is opening up a Facebook group rather than trying to make it some big thing. Start small in your community, and now it's growing to like the 3 counties. That's awesome.
Yes. Thank you. It really is very simple. It's free. I think that the Lord gave me the idea of the Facebook group because it's where people are already spending time. So it's not something additional they have to add into their schedule. It's just really scrolling through, some that we have a lady in Orange County who puts a Bible verse up almost every day. And so that's just nice. It's nice for her to be able to share her Bible verse each day with the Christians in her county. And it's nice for us to receive that Bible verse every day. It's very simple, but it's a way for her to have a broader reach to people who it means something to.
Yeah, I love that. And I know Crystal Parker, and she's in your area as well. And she's been on this show. We were actually talking about it's called Why Faith-Based Businesses Are More Profitable. And it's great conversation that we had. And I know you're there as well. And I know that's one of the things that she talks about is through the Christian Chamber of Commerce is to connect the business people so that we can support each other in the business, maybe do business, shop from each other, support each other in transactions, but also like in what you're talking about as well is that emotional support, that spiritual support, prayer requests, and all of that. So good. Yeah.
I agree
So
with that Christian-based businesses are more successful than others because of one reason. Christians who exercise the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, are going to be trustworthy to other people. And they say to do business with someone, you need to know, like, and trust them. And if you're exhibiting those fruits of the Spirit, people are going to trust you. And so in turn, your business will be successful.
well, you just answered my question that I was going to ask you is how has that affected your business? I love that. And it's true. And, there's a lot of people that will label themselves Christians, but that aren't necessarily operating by the principles. What we're talking about here is, like you said, the fruits of the Spirit being evident in the way that you're doing business and the way that you're doing life. And that's what makes the difference. It's not necessarily saying I go to church on Easter and Christmas or whatever the case is, or that my family was Christian, but it's really about operating and living by those principles. And I love that we're seeing more and more of that, where it's not exclusion, exclusive or exclusionary is the word I was looking for. But it's really about being inclusive and saying, yeah, we want to love people, love God, love one another as yourself. And so we can do that, and we can use our businesses to create value and help others and make a difference. And I know that you're doing that in your business. And maybe even just to wrap up, talking about the type of law, we really didn't talk about that yet, the type of law that you chose, right? Because, it is a choice that you get to choose what type, of law that you practice. And so maybe why you chose that. What is it? And then why did you choose that?
Sure. So I do injury and insurance cases, and I kind of fell into it because of my prior experience. When I graduated law school, I didn't really know anything about any of the types of law. I took courses in them, but I didn't know really what was going to be a good fit for me or not. And so I was really just looking for the best paying job that I could find. And so I fell into the insurance defense world, and even on my first day of work, still didn't really fully understand what I was going to be doing. And then they started handing me cases, and I realized, oh, it's car accidents. Okay, like I get this. And so I started learning a number of things on the defense side of things. And if it turned out to be a good fit for me, the litigation world is adversarial and it's challenging, and I loved it. It was a good fit for my personality. So because I knew those things so well on the defense side, when I started my own firm, it just made sense for me to continue doing those things. I do them on the opposing side now. I represent the public as opposed to the insurance companies. And I think this is a better place and a better fit for me because I feel that I'm making more of an impact when I'm helping individuals versus an insurance company. So I like to have the direct relationship with the clients and help them to recover either from their injury or from being denied or underpaid by their insurance company. I find a lot of reward in that. So I kind of fell into it. It wasn't as much of a conscious selection of different things and saying this is what I want to do because I didn't have any lawyers in my family. I didn't really even know a lot. Actually, I wanted to be a criminal attorney is what I initially had planned to do. But they had a hiring freeze in my hometown the year that I graduated. So that was when I had to look at other options. And I think things turned out for the best because where I am now, I don't think I would have been had I been able to pursue what my intention was.
Yeah, it's the grow where you're planted. So
Yes,
yeah, that's awesome. So where can people find out more and connect with you and all the things that you're up to?
sure. So I have a website for my law firm is Boltz Legal. That's BOLTZ legal.com. And my podcast also has a website, Miss Biz, that's MSBIZ.com. And then I'm on all the social media as well under Boltz Legal and Miss Biz.
Awesome. Brooke, thank you so much for sharing and, just even like encouraging those through your story, your own story, encouraging those that they can integrate faith and business. We didn't talk much about your family, but I know you have a daughter and you're married. And so integrating all of those things, having that work-life balance, you live it personally. And then of course, supporting your team members to be able to have that as well. It's great. And so it gives people hope that it is possible because so often in the entrepreneurial space, it is the hustle and grind, and you got to put your hours in, you got to put your time in. And yes, you do. I believe that also as you are, as being a faith-based person myself, is that there's a level of grace upon what you're doing and favor upon what you're doing when you're doing it in the way that is actually aligned with, like, biblically aligned. It's the fruits of the spirit are demonstrated. It's just there's more grace, and I've experienced that myself too. And so yeah, it's good. So anyway, thank you so much for being here today. I encourage our listeners to go to boltzlegal.com, boltzlegal.com, and we'll make sure that's in the show notes, as well as Ms. Biz, the podcast. And so we'll make sure the links are there, and you can connect with Brooke and what she's doing. We'd love to hear your stories. I always say, leaders of transformation, take action. Tell us how this has impacted you. Tell us what you're up to. We'd love to hear that, so that we can support you along your entrepreneurial journey as a purpose-driven entrepreneur and someone who wants to be a leader of transformation, making a difference in the world. So you can reach out to us, of course, through LinkedIn, our website, leadersoftransformation.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, all those places as well, Instagram, and love to hear from you. Thanks again, and we look forward to having you join us next week for another episode of the Leaders of Transformation.